Ladies and gentlemen, we will now start the session 1, Security, Migration and Control of External Borders. We have invited 3 speakers. Mr. Wolfgang Baumann, on my right side, Secretary General at the Federal Ministry of Defense of the Republic of Austria. Mr. Bernd Körner, Deputy Executive Director of the European Border and Coast Guard Agency, Frontex. Very interesting. And as third speaker, Mrs. Melita Sunic, a long-standing employee of UNHCR and Director of Transcultural Campaigning, an agency for communication and research in the field of migration to address the participants. Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Baumann, the floor is yours, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the national parliaments, of the European Parliament, of the EU Commission, a very cordial welcome to you here on behalf of the Minister of Defense, Mr. Kunasek. And first of all, I would like to thank the representatives of our Parliament for preparing and holding and then giving some follow-up to this conference. Now, this interparliamentary conference for a common defense and security policy and for a common defense and foreign policy was founded in 2012, and it's a very important platform for us nowadays for the exchange of opinions and views and information on very important topics. And the special topic of this conference concerning security, migration, and external borders. This is a topic where Austria, where particularly in 2015, was strongly affected by this migration crisis. And therefore, it's important for us as representatives of the Defense Ministry to put a special focus on Austria's EU presidency. Now, we all have our goals for this EU presidency, and we have coordinated this with the High Representative Federica Mogherini. Migration is certainly not a matter of national defense, but here in Austria we have a special culture so that Austrian soldiers, also very young soldiers doing their compulsory service, were employed at the external borders, the former Schengen borders, supported the customs offices. So here in Austria, we do have a very good culture of cooperation, a cooperation of cooperating with each other, and certainly this cannot be transferred on a one-to-one basis to other countries and to other armies. Dear participants, unfortunately, in our environment, what we can see here in the eastern and southeastern region of our neighborhood, we can see that the security situation has deteriorated. And complex security issues are confronting us now, and the borders between the tasks of the Ministry of the Interior, Frontex, and from our perspective also, and this is the national perspective, concerning national defense. These borders are disappearing gradually. And these new conflicts, migration, uncontrolled migration, and terrorism affect the stability of Europe, whether we want it or not. This is just simply a matter of fact. And we can see here from the performance at elections that the Austrian people is also aware of that, and that a high level of protection and a large number of measures are needed. Of course, we can urge that that peace should be brought to these conflicts, that migration is curbed. If you look at the demographic development, then the conflict regions, global warming, etc., all of this makes it necessary to act not only in those areas and to create some more stability there, but in the framework of the European Union and on a national basis, we must also find and be able to offer appropriate solutions. And therefore, the slogan, the motto of our presidency is a Europe that protects. So to our population and to our peoples, we just have to show that we are in a position to protect Europe if this is necessary. And thus, it is one of the main concerns in the course of Austria's EU presidency to strengthen the external borders and to protect the Austrian external borders, and also to improve the stability on the Western Balkans. And especially the discussion that I heard when I came in showed that this situation is very fragile in this environment and in this area. And here in Austria, with our background, with our history, what we are trying to do is to help sustainably in contributing to a peaceful settlement and a peaceful solution. Unfortunately, we still have a long way to go to reach peace. There are many conflicts, and many conflicts have been stabilized but have not been solved. So we should not be mistaken here. But for the population in Austria in particular, we have to do everything so that we will not have again a situation at our borders as we had it back in 2015. A loss of control over our Austrian borders is something that we will no longer and not accept again. However, let me say it once again, as a representative of the Ministry of National Defense, it's not a matter for the Defense Ministry to take care of this. It's a task of the Ministry of the Interior, and we support when so called for, and after the political decisions have been taken by the government and given us the instructions, then we will intervene. Currently working at the border, up to 1,000 soldiers are there supporting the Ministry of the Interior. And that works very well. I myself was at the frontier, at the borders repeatedly, and we have, as I said, a special culture already in the training of our soldiers. So this does not mean that everybody will be addressed and faced with a weapon when coming to Austria, but these persons will be stopped. And depending on the competences, these persons will be then forwarded to the appropriate bodies. We don't want a green border to be opened and to be crossed during night, or smugglers helping people to come into Austria illegally. This is something we do not want to accept, and we will certainly not accept it in the future. What we want is that civilian authorities get some support if there are peaks in migratory movements, so that we don't have to develop structures for all times of a dimension that we may not necessarily need in the years to come if the situation calms down, hopefully, and that we will then again have large units of police forces that have to be disbanded. But if necessary, what we want to do is in line with the European Union and in the spirit of this country to provide assistance and support. And we also want to help bridge areas and help people who need asylum so that they don't have to smuggle themselves into the country, but can come to border stations and declare themselves to be asylum seekers so that they can then be handed over to the proper authorities and that a proper asylum procedure can then be started. We support, if necessary, also the Ministry of the Interior to fight off terrorism, and if so necessary, the Austrian model is very efficient. This is our view, and we think it's also very successful. And during the EU presidency, we've had already a number of conferences on this issue, and they confirmed this approach that we have. There's been an informal meeting or summit of the ministers of the defense, and Mr. Kunasek, our Minister for Defense, proposed these ideas, and this has also been forwarded to Federica Mogherini in written form, and here we have had some positive feedback already. As I said before, this is what we are offering. It's a model that needs to be developed for the future. But of course, it cannot be taken over on a one-to-one basis, and it cannot be taken over from one day to the next by other countries. To provide assistance to Frontex or for national countries, but it works in 2015 and 2016 in connection with Hungary. So there, we were able to give assistance and support. Dear participants, the second important issue in the course of the EU presidency is to stabilize the Western Balkans. If do not stabilize the Western Balkans in line with the motivation of the European Union, then just imagine way back in the 90s, who would have thought that in the former Yugoslavia, where we all went for a holiday, there would be a war? That there were terrible conditions where we in Europe all thought that this wouldn't happen again in Europe. And I myself, way back in 1991, was in one of the military interventions at the border there to Yugoslavia, and who would have thought at that time that this would come so close to Austrian borders so quickly? But today we also see difficulties between Ukraine and Hungary. Ukraine is closer from Vienna than our westernmost province, Vorarlberg, where Mr. Bosch comes from, for example. So the Ukraine is not far away from here. It's our immediate neighborhood, you could say, and therefore it's our genuine interest that we have here and exert here a stabilizing influence and contribute to that stabilization. On the Western Balkans, what we support is the build-up of the necessary armed forces, the way as we know them here in the European Union, and how in recent decades they have proven to be effective. And it is in this spirit that I look forward to an enriching exchange of views and to further proposals and ideas by you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Baumann, for taking the time to be with us today and for your very interesting keynote speech. May I now ask Mr. Körner, the Deputy Executive Director of Frontex, to take the floor.
Distinguished Chair, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the invitation. I am grateful to the Austrian Presidency for putting this particular topic high on its agenda, because it is indeed important that various elements of the EU system are used in a coherent and coordinated manner, in an integrated manner, tackling also the root causes and at the same time serving the security interest of the European Union. Allow me to speak today to you as the Deputy Executive Director of the European Border and Coast Guard Agency. We fully recognize the viewpoints that were expressed by my forespeaker, and we all know that there is currently the legislative process ongoing. We consider ourselves being an operational agency tackling the forms, developments, and flows of irregular migration. I think today, between all of us, there is a unanimous consent that the management of the EU's external borders is paramount for a smooth functioning of the Schengen area, which allows for unrestricted travel throughout 26 European countries, systematic but facilitated checks for all regular travelers, which has a tremendous economic aspect, but also strict and seamless protection so that those who should not be granted entry or try to bypass checks and enter illegally are not able to enter. And all this, of course, in strict compliance with international law and fundamental rights. Especially from a border management perspective, and this has been mentioned several times also during today's conference, the last few years have completely reshaped the environment in which we operate. And I think there are many things already mentioned that do not need to be repeated. But as a consequence of an increased number of travelers into the EU, new security challenges of an even more globalized world, as well as unprecedented migratory flows into Europe, the operational environment really looks different today. This has had massive effects also on our agency. The previous Frontex has been reshaped and remodeled, and it was on the 6th of October 2016 when the regulation for the European Border and Coast Guard Agency entered into force. This was, to a certain extent, of course, a reaction, a very rapid reaction to the migratory crisis. It brought us an upscale in staffing. We currently will have, by the end of the year, somewhere between 700 and 788 staff members, while in the previous times we used to have 300, and if you go back to the founding of the agency 13 years ago, we were 41. That's the growth rate of the agency, and I do not even want to mention the tremendous resources that are made available for us in order to fulfill the expectations and live up to the expectations. We received increased powers and responsibilities, including in the domain of the Coast Guard functions, and we received an enhanced role in supporting returns. Let me briefly, in the first round, walk you through some of our activities before I then, in the second round, try to also walk together with you through some of the questions that were raised in the background paper. Today, Frontex coordinates joint operations and rapid border interventions. We currently have 3 joint operations on annual basis, which is Poseidon in Greece, which is Themis in Italy, and which is Indalo in Spain. We have a 4th joint operation running in Spain, which is Hera. We have focal point offices all over Europe, starting from the Arctic region all the way down to the Black Sea. We are present at airports, at land border crossing points, and at seaports. And we have, on average, deployed every week between 1,200 and 1,400 border guards at all those spots. 1,200 to 1,400 border guards, this is not Frontex staff. Those are border guards that are made available by many of the member states that are currently present here. And let me take the opportunity to also thank you for that, for the availability of the border and coast guards, for the availability alone in the month of September of 32 maritime assets, of 10 aerial means, of 77 patrol cars, and 20 mobile offices, just to list some of the assets used in the month of September. Frontex is also more and more involved as a kind of a first filter in detection of cross-border crime and terrorism. Another example, from 2016 until July 2018, Frontex transmitted to Europol nearly 2,600 information packages containing personal data related to over 5,700 suspects, nearly 3,500 means of communication, over 1,000 locations, and by doing this, we managed to jointly achieve 250 hits, meaning that 250 traffickers, facilitators, organizers were apprehended, and the business behind the migration flows, the organized smuggling and trafficking, could at least be attacked. Frontex also plays the already mentioned enhanced role in supporting returns. This year, again, to give you a number, we had so far 257 return operations. To put that in the right perspective, you have 200 working days per day, which means that on average, we were in the air with about 1.5 to 1.6 planes per day so far. I think this is a reasonable result. We are trying to increase that, but I think the way is working out well. We supported you as members of the member states with 9,261 successfully implemented returns to all over the world, meaning 37 destinations ranging from Peru in the west to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Vietnam in the east, from Russia in the north down to increasingly more often in the sub-Saharan region. So basically all those destinations are available to us, and we are trying to enhance this from time to time. Just yesterday, for the first time since 2011, a delegation from the Gambia was visiting us. All that what we do, we see in the context of the European integrated border management model. If you look at our regulation, Articles 30 and 4, we are bound to implement a European integrated border management model, meaning work together. Work together, all the different entities that are engaged in border surveillance, in border control, in veterinary checks, in health and safety, in any other field that might be of relevance. Where does now Frontex involvement in CSDP and CFSP come in? Frontex fully acknowledges CSDP missions as valuable partners whose involvement in third countries offers unique opportunities to address challenges and threats to EU security and to contribute to the implementation of the already mentioned European border management model. Let me give you again a few examples. Frontex has supported and clearly cooperated and closely cooperated with UNAFOR since Sofia, since its inception in 2015. There is a permanent operational cooperation and coordination with Frontex Joint Operation Themis and UNAFOR Sofia through the deployment of operational liaison officers. This cooperation has also resulted in the launching of the first crime information cell, where we jointly move even further up front in order to detect criminal activities and be able to counteract appropriately. We've also taken good advantage of UBAM Libya, located in Tunis, which we have used as a clearinghouse for all the measures that we from the agency have been implementing together with the relevant bodies in Libya. Frontex considers this model, and this is already in use today, as functional and is ready to replicate this model also in other missions. And there are some more I could mention. There is good cooperation with UCAP Sahel Mali and UCAP Sahel Niger, where we work closely together via our liaison officer posted in Niger. Frontex is also, of course, ready to contribute to the planning of the CSDP activities. We have a wide portfolio of risk analysis products, among them being the risk analysis, the annual risk analysis, where we think there is good grounds where we can jointly come forward in the development of common activities. In the development of a privileged partnership which would facilitate coordination between EU entities and ensure that any potential involvement of third partners is closely coordinated with the overall work of the European Border and Coast Guard. Allow me to mention another fact. I already mentioned our liaison officer in Niamey as one means for close cooperation. Also, the network of Frontex liaison officers deployed to third countries is expanding. We are present in Ankara, we are present in Belgrade, we are present in Niamey. We will be present as from this year in Senegal and in Tunisia. We enforce our presence in the Western Balkans area. We try to build up a network of roughly between 10 and 15 liaison officers that should be out by the end of 2020 and should be able to also give a significant external footprint to our activities. What was also mentioned today already was technical assistance projects, also one of the fields that we have been enhancing. So far we have roughly 3.5 projects running. Why 3.5? Because the first one, the Eastern Partnership project, is running out, and here we were acting together with the Ukraine. We have a common project together with IOM, UNHCR and EASO in the Western Balkans and Turkey on protection-sensitive management of migration flows. We have a project in Africa on risk analysis as an instrument to fight serious cross-border crime. And we will have a new project on tailor-made assistance to the southern neighborhood, going from Lebanon all the way over to Morocco. So there's a wide range of activities also there where we are open for cooperation and coordination in the widest fields, trying to truly implement integrated border management, which means that we really have to go out in the pre-frontier area in the third countries where some of the problems we have to tackle at the borders find its origin. Finally, a few words about the future of our agency. While being here today, I have been several times already addressed with the famous number of the 10,000. Let me start this way. Just a few weeks ago, in the State of the Union address, President Juncker announced this new proposal, where also the 10,000 were mentioned. From an operational point of view, the 10,000 are clearly defined, the 10,000 are clearly arguable, but what we definitely need, no matter what the outcome of the negotiations will be, is we need additional staff. Because as I said at the very beginning, the operational environment has changed, the problems have enhanced, we now have an increase to a very high extent at the Western Mediterranean route, where we urgently need to also jointly with the member states to counteract. And the more we get at our disposal, the more we can also release for the member states for public order or other opportunities. We will also look on how far we can get executive powers. We will look on how far it will come with more support on returns and stronger cooperation with other EU countries. And we will look what the result will be, where we will ask to procure our own equipment. All this, in my opinion, is an ongoing process to be closely supported by us, and it's a clear and good step forward to support us even better achieving the goals expected from us, to contribute to facilitated checks, but also to be able to implement strict surveillance. Let me finish my intervention by saying that it's clear for us that in the external dimension, Frontex is not alone. We are together with many different players. Our operational activities are part and the parcel of the overall EU foreign and security policy. The success and the limitations of this policy have therefore direct influence on what we can do at operational level. I therefore particularly welcome the fact that migration and border management is increasingly among the focus issues, also in the CSDP and CFSP context. Thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to describe a little bit our field of portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Körner, for sharing with us your ideas on how to strengthen Frontex and its role, and we will start with the 10,000, I hope. Now I would like to ask Mrs. Melita Sunjic from the United Nations to address the audience. Please.
Thank you, ex-United Nations, which allows me to speak more freely. Okay. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, werte Abgeordnete.
Ladies and gentlemen, respected members of Parliament, perhaps I'm bringing a rather unusual strand of topic into this discussion. We're talking about refugees and migrants. So there's a kind of narrative of migration, the communication. What is it that motivates them? Where do they get their information from? What do they know beforehand about Europe before they try to come here? And what do they have? What's their plan? So I speak to them on a very personal level. I deal with the personal issues to do with migration. I've only got 7 minutes to talk about one of the most complicated topics on our planet at the moment, and naturally I can't achieve that. So therefore I'm going to put up 7 theses for you. I would like to provoke you somewhat so that you search for solutions which are just as complex and just as differentiated as the problem is itself. There is no politician involved in this debate who could be more dangerous than a politician who is seeking simple answers. So the thesis, number 1, I've put it in German, English, and French. I wasn't so... I didn't actually realize it would have been useful. I could have put it in Serbian and Croatian as well. So closing the borders down as a form of management of migration don't reduce the pressure, the migratory pressure. It actually increases it. Why is that? Because in the debate, they often use water metaphors, and these aren't actually accurate. They talk about floods and flows. So the thing is that if water is flowing towards a house, you can try and cut the water off or stop the water, and that's what border controls do. But you need to know where the water's coming from, and you need to know how you can manipulate the flows. So it's not any different when you're dealing with flows of migration. You can't just close your eyes and close your borders and hope that it will stop. You have to understand why people are coming, and you have to understand what you can do to somehow regulate international migratory flows. The second thesis, my second thesis, the closer that migrants get to Europe, the more risks they're prepared in order to finally get to their destination. People who have got as far as the coast of the Mediterranean, they've got almost just before their destination. They've got into debt, they've sold everything they have been subject to fear, to hunger and thirst. They may have been tortured, they may have been sexually abused. They have been in the hands of military groups and armed groups. They may have been enslaved. They may have to have paid those groups to set them free. They've been threatened with death. The family at home has helped them and made great sacrifices to help them make their way towards Europe, and they expect compensation. These people have just got 2 options. They either get where they're going to, or they die out trying. And we have to make it clear what the dangers are. But we have to make these dangers, the dangers that people will face, clear much further on in the process, in their countries of origin, before they get tricked by the propaganda provided by the human smugglers. Number 3 is that Europe needs 2 distinct systems to manage economic migration and refugees. Well, how are we doing this at the moment? At the moment, the European asylum system is overburdened because it is both refugees as well as economic migrants who are trying to legalize their status through asylum processes. So that means that, well, there's no regular migration mechanism in place for people to come as economic migrants. And the problem is that the asylum system is supposed to provide protection for people, and it is not it's not a suitable system for economic migrants. We could take an awful lot of pressure off our asylum systems if we were to take economic migrants out of that system and give them another option, another form of access to Europe. We have this would also meet demand in the European labour markets and economy, because then we were able to see what people have in the way of qualifications and how much work, where they could be used to work. In many African societies, it is normal that young men, before they marry, they leave their homes. There's a lot of internal African migration going on. They don't all come to Europe, but first they go away from home. They see what money they can learn and what they can do, or they can learn something. There were a couple of million Africans who were working in Libya. They'd gone for a couple of years, they worked there, they learned something, they were managed to get qualifications, vocational qualifications, and then they went back home in order to start a family. They benefited from this, and so did their countries of origin. And I don't see why Europe couldn't do it this way as well, because this is for. I thank the technical support here. So, in order to, it's less expensive to help refugees when they get to the first country that receives them. It's safer for everybody. So, the Syrian war has been going on for 4 years before large numbers of refugees began to come through to Europe. They didn't all want to go to Europe straight off to Europe. That wasn't the plan. But we could have expected them to come. We could have known this would happen because in those countries where there were a lot of people had sought asylum, they were left alone with their problems. The donor countries had given only 30% of the funds available that the humanitarian organization said that was needed in order to provide basic necessities, to some extent, for the people in the region. So this means that from 2015, they had to leave and come to Europe. Did we learn the lessons from that? So I've been in northern Iraq. I came back yesterday, and I visited Kurdish refugee camps. There, the humanitarian funding is being reduced, and the criteria for humanitarian help are being increased because there's not enough financial support available. I saw a number of refugees there and interviewed them about their future plans. And unsurprisingly, a lot of them are thinking about secondary migration and moving into Europe. This is 5. Better speed and quality of asylum decisions and quick return to their original countries from those who are not needing protection is a more humane approach and can reduce irregular migration. So the quantity and the efficiency of our asylum authorities must be improved because the procedures here take far too long. People live here in a kind of limbo. They don't know. Should they be afraid that they're going to be deported? Should they learn the language and try to integrate? And that creates problems for them, the individuals, but also for the society which is receiving them. It's also expensive. So it should be fast. Those who need who really need to be offered protection, they should quite quickly be made aware of that. And those who do not need repair and should be sent back quickly to their country of origins, because that would also give a signal to other potential migrants in the countries of origin that actually irregular migration is perhaps not such a good idea and it won't pay. And in the meantime, that could help us to reduce irregular immigration. Thesis 6. You have to stop the smuggling industry. You already have all the necessary information. I could tell you right now the present names, telephone numbers of smugglers, the regular departure times, the routes that they're using, the prices, and I can tell you in your consulate where you have officials who are corrupt and who are selling Schengen visas. All of that is available. It's not encrypted, and it's on the internet. The success of these, the payment that is given to the smugglers can be followed electronically. So you have to follow the money. All of the information, and for everything for these are all international cartels. These are not just a couple of individuals that are running something for a little bit of extra money on the side. And all this information is available in the social media networks, that you can find it. Every week there's a report drawn up on that. And I had this observer status at the UN, and in 2 years that was moved over to the EU. The information is there, it's available. If you want to stop it, then you have to attack their money flows and the cartels. It's no good just catching the little fish that you might be able to get here in Europe that are involved with the industry. And finally, thesis 7. Borders should be safe, they should be protected, but they should not be sealed against those who are in need of protection. Otherwise, Europe will sell its soul. Being able to control your own borders, and I'm sure as security experts, I'm sure that you've realized it's a right to do with sovereignty. Nobody's calling that into question. Migration has to be managed. It must be managed, but there's no point being hysterical about it. Europe is not being flooded. We've come back to our water-related metaphors. It's not being flooded with migrants. There are 3 or 4 top countries who have 5,200 migrants per million. So you're talking about per million of their population, so 5.2%. But many have far less than that. If you compare that with Jordan, Jordan is a less stable country than many European countries. You're talking about 180,000 refugees per million head of population. So to get hysterical about the situation in Europe is not really necessary. I am myself from a refugee family, and my family was given a second chance here, and I don't feel that I'm a particular risk to Austria. Some people say that the character of Europe can only be protected if we put up the barbed wire up and we stop people who are in danger from coming here. But it's exactly the opposite is true. The core of Europe, the values that make Europe, Europe, if we replace that with a system that keeps people out and it does not respect human rights, ladies and gentlemen, don't allow Europe to lose its soul on the migration issue.
Mrs. Sunjic, thank you for your speech. Dear colleagues, the speakers list is now closed, and we will start the discussion. The time limit is now 2 minutes. Please accept it. 2 minutes for every speaker. And please raise your hand. I am waiting for the list of the speakers. Oh, there is. I would like to invite the first speaker, Mr. Mario Borghesio, to take the floor. Please.
Grazie Presidente. Ho ascoltato con molta attenzione Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I've been following with great interest the last presentation, and we are all responsible for regulating migration flows. And what actually I would have expected the representative of the UN to speak in favor of the defense of the rights of people. Also, Pope Francis speaks about those rights. And even Federica Mogherini didn't mention those rights, while the Deputy Executive Director of Frontex spoke about them. The main topics of politics and foreign policy seem to have been delegated. The main part of foreign policy seems to have been delegated to Frontex. We attach all great importance to solving the problem of illegal migration. It's true, Europe has not been flooded by migrants. The problem is that too many of them are irregular migrants, and they were also able to be received by Europe through the instrument of asylum. There are two directives of the European Union which are too generous with migrants. The principle of asylum is a very noble and valuable principle, which is something recognized to all human beings. But what is not fair is the criminal use of this principle. When this is made, and this is made by criminal organizations and even by terrorist networks. We have the problem of influx of migrants through Libya. And also, we have the problem of foreign fighters in Europe. So what is needed is to be in line with Dublin rules, but they prove to be insufficient and incapable of solving the current situation. Let's not forget about Libya.
Please accept the 2 minutes limit.
Oui, merci.
Thank you very much.
Merci.
Now, the new measures that were adopted in 2015 at the European Union is to strengthen the protection of borders, and this has helped us to reduce the flows of migrations. And this is the struggle of Frontex, and they have just achieved all these results that have been outlined by the Vice Director of. But the humanitarian difficulties continue. The free movement of persons and the Schengen borders and the free exchange of goods between nations. This is a fundamental value to the European Union, and member states here want to send back people, but this is contrary to these values, and we need means in order to by means of which the Dublin regulation fulfills all these objectives and objectives of solidarity, which consists in better sharing the responsibilities in case of a crisis, and also the responsibility of respecting human rights and international law, and an objective of cooperation, extending the introduction and the launching of measures so that there is a controlled flow of migrants from Africa. And so far, this has been mitigated, but I think this would be the only way to find a solution to this migratory issue. And the European Union and Africa, this forum, will be a very important issue in this connection. Thank you very much to find your solution. And then we need also some prevention, and we have to fight actively against the climate change, and this also channels these migratory flows, and all the objectives that were adopted in Paris need to be implemented. We don't want a Europe that is just for needs. We are quite prepared that we protect our citizens, and everybody needs to, well, we should be humane and humanitarian to all those that need it, and this is the practice that we have been following so far. Thank you. Thank you very much for these 2 minutes.
Zauralek, please.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize, but I would like to recommend to concentrate more on our agenda. We are representatives of foreign affairs committees of countries of EU. We are not representative of committees of ministries of interior or representatives of internal policy. I am convinced that a very important problem is lying in common foreign policy of the European Union. Allow me to show you what I mean. It was said in one of these introductory speeches that the big number, maybe more than 50% of refugees or migrants are from Syria. From Syria. All the time we are repeating that it's a must to concentrate on root causes, to address the root causes of migration, to solve problems in countries of origin. No, Syria is one concrete example. How it looks with the role of Europe and European Union and Syria, I feel very sorry, but we are only bystander. The impact of events in Syria is fundamentally influencing political situation in our countries. And how it looks, there are many players in this game in Syria. The role of Russia is growing. There is very important player is Iran and Saudi Arabia, but Europe is under the most under the influence of what is happening in Syria. That's why it seems to me very important to speak out about our inability to influence things in this country. Why we are not able to make something. It's not only because we have no troops, we have no boot on the ground in this country. It's also because we are not able to have consensus and to unite between the countries. There are also different interests in some countries of the European Union in Syria. And I remember many talks and many meetings where we were not able to unite. Syria, as I said, is one of the concrete examples of sources of these problems. And we are not able to unite. We are not able to say, for example, that our priority is to stop violence, to stop suffering of the people. And it has to be a real priority. And we are discussing, we are dividing, we are split it. We are split it. On the one side, there is no chance, there is a reason why there is no chance to address current administration, because it's no partner for us. And the result is that we are bystanders. I would like to ask you to try to speak about foreign policy issue. It's fundamental.
Danke sehr. Frau Sabine.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Sabine Lösing, please. Thank you very much. Here I am. Oh, just to... So, if one day I'm not a member of the European Parliament, when I'm no longer in Brussels, not living there, not working there, part of my work is there, there's one thing I will really miss, and that is working together with people from very different countries, with people from very different coloured skin, and living in a city with people from all over the place. And I'm very happy about having this opportunity to talk about identity. So Mrs. Sundic has made it very clear that the strategy of closing Fortress Europe is not a good idea. You can't just close your borders to deal with migration. I'm very pleased that she's done that. So one thing maybe you missed out with regard to this idea of closing Europe off is that trying to move the external borders to other countries, to countries to non-European countries, or non-European Union countries, rather. I feel that this relocation of our borders will create far more problems. Problems in Niger, for example, in the countries where the problems already exist. And today, people are not dying in the Mediterranean anymore, rather they're dying in the desert. They're dying in the Sahara. And I find that this is a scandal, and it's counterproductive. So the truth of the matter is that we are using developmental aid money in order to make this happen, rather than using it to fight the causes of migration. So we're stopping people being able to flee, rather than stopping the things which are causing them to flee. So it should be the need that we should be fighting. It should be the causes that we should fighting. What is making people flee from a catastrophe, and this is going to continue if we continue to do this. And it doesn't matter how high we build the walls. There will just be more people who die trying to cross them. So if we're talking about the EU as a peace project, then today we have to say that Europe should protect. Well, we have to also protect the people who are trying to escape from these disasters. So we need to deal with climate, we need to protect the environment, we need to protect the people so that they can live in these countries, and we also have to make sure there are legal escape routes for them, and we have to have a system of solidarity within the European Union in order to support people who have fled from their homes. Thank you. Piero Franco Rodolfo Fassino, please.
Demografia.
Starting from demography, 1,250,000,000 people live in Africa. Today, there will be 2.3 billion. In 2050, there will be 4 billion out of 11 billion people all over the world. Nigeria will become, at the end of this century, the third largest country of the world before the United States. It's clear that the solution of the destiny of 4 billion people cannot be managed only in terms of migration. So how are we going to deal with the development of Africa in this century? What will the world be looking like at the end of this century? This is our responsibility. This means that when we speak about our budgets, national budgets in our national parliaments, we have to remember that the development of Africa will have to be considered in our budgets if we want to support the development of that continent with specific items of budgets. If we want to contain, in the middle term, migratory flows, we have to remember that. We will be having migrants in the near future in Europe. It is said that we have to make a distinction between refugees and economic migrants, but if we have to make this difference, we have to develop two different strategies for one group and for the other. We seem to have a strategy to receive migrants, but not for economic migrants. If we want to receive refugees, we also have to develop a solution for the other category. So the European Union has to develop a comprehensive strategy to manage the flow of economic migrants in a legal way, through legal channels. This is the only way to effectively combat the activity of smugglers. And how about management of external borders? This might mean what Mr. Kerner said, and I thank him for that, or this could mean to close borders. But as was said, the more we close, the greater the pressure on us. So it will be necessary to have an effective strategy of the flow of economic migrants if we want to effectively manage the EU external borders. Thank you.
Is Audronius Atsoubalis, please take the floor.
It's here. I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues. Just few remarks regarding our today's discussion. Firstly, I see the recent proposals from the Commission as a technical instruments which could assist in controlling migration flows. But more important is a question of our political will. Do we continue to allow illegal migrants to enter EU member states as Italy, Greece, Spain, Malta, these countries should not become hostages of our undecisive policy. We could strengthen Frontex with an additional 10,000 guards. But the essential question is, do they become real guards of our borders, or do they repeat the experience of the Operation Sophia? As you remember, the primary task of this operation was to combat human trafficking. However, in practice, it became mainly a rescuing operation. I would say even more. In reality, it's indirectly assisting international criminals in exploiting often desperate people in their search for a better life. We should also mention rescuing activities of some, not all, but some NGOs, which sometimes raises doubts regarding their real intentions. And last but not least, as for now, Lithuania is effectively delivering on our commitments regarding resettlement. However, let's not be so fast to condemn those EU countries that have critical approach on some initiatives of common EU migration policy. In this context, any attempts to establish the link between decisions of EU member states on migration policy and the financial allocations from the next multi-annual financial framework, in my opinion, are not acceptable. Our European family is really big and diverse, and sometimes it takes time until we find a common solution. But only such solutions are long-lasting and effective. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. The next speaker is Vitalino Canas, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is, of course, a very controversial issue, so let me start with a very clear statement. We don't have in Portugal a serious problem with immigration, but, of course, we feel that there are many countries in Europe which has that kind of problem, and we are solidarity with those countries. And we are ready to share the burden that those countries are having, including Austria and others. What we are not ready to accept is that each individual country in Europe try to make its own policy according to their own national interests. We should have a European policy, and we should strive to get that common policy among all of us with the responsibility of all of us. And those policies that policy must be integrated. When I look at this, the title of the conference, I see immigration, security, control, external borders. Of course, we must be simple when we do titles, but immigration policy, it's much more than this. It's also to discuss with African countries for having common approaches to this problem. Because we can lock frontiers. We lock the frontier in the Aegean Sea. We lock the frontier in the Balkans. We are locking this frontier in Libya. Now we have the problem with Morocco. Maybe in the future we must have an agreement with Morocco similar to the Turkish agreement. But locking is not enough. We must have a strong dialogue with African countries on this issue. And not only with African countries. China is one of the countries that is taking more from Africa. But China is not helping in solving some of the problems of Africa. I think Europe should have a strong dialogue with China on Africa, because China must help us in help Africa to solve their problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jan Lipavsky. Please take the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would state that the borders define state, and we have to understand it. And the maritime rescue operation in Mediterranean Sea, these rescue operations basically became the mechanism to enter Europe freely. And unless we find a real solution to stop it, the migration crisis will continue. And my question is, what are those solutions? And there even may be on the level of some changes to international law, because by international law, you have to help a person in a distress in the international waters. But clearly, this mechanism is about getting on a boat, getting to middle of the sea and being rescued. And since being rescued, you have to be transferred to the safe port, which is not in Libya actually. Then you enter the Europe. So it's a mechanism, it's not a rescue operation. And I would like to stress this, that the European unableness to solve this mechanism leads to the rise of extremist parties, which is the situation we are now in. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Bodil Valero, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to start with Mrs. Sunjic, because I agree with you 90% at least, and especially in the last part where you talk about if we are doing what we are actually doing today in Europe, then we will lose our soul. I think that's very correct. So I go to Mr. Baumann. You say the slogan is a Europe that protects. And I think it's a good slogan if that also includes protect people in need. But I feel that today in Europe we are protecting us from them and not them. So just a comment on that. Mr. Kerner, yes, you speak about the root causes, you speak about it has to be in line with human rights and so on, and that's correct. That is what we always say. But the problem is that we say it, but in reality, it's not always like that, and mostly it's not like that. Even though we educate Frontex, we educate the Libyan Coast Guard, but does it really happen? Does the Libyan Coast Guard respect human rights? And especially I think that because we are not even respecting human rights in our own member states, not all of us. And in some cases, we even criminalize those people who help refugees or those organizations that help refugees or that rescue lives in the Mediterranean Sea. I cannot see how that is fulfilling the human rights in Europe. So in reality, my question is, how can we guarantee that we fulfill and respect the human rights in rescuing migrants when we give the responsibility to the Libyan Coast Guard, when we cannot even do it in our own member states? Thank you.
Thank you. Lolita Tsigane, please.
Thank you, Chair. I believe that migration has really many different aspects, and all of those aspects require different responses. And for that reason, I believe that there is no one good solution, but a complexity of solutions. And I believe that the European Union has been very successful in enhancing the mandate of Frontex. And also, on behalf of the European Affairs Committee in the Latvian Parliament, I would like to say that the further enhancement of Frontex mandate is necessary, advisable, and it definitely has to go forward. And I believe that Mr. Conner already very appropriately mentioned that the initial proposal will be discussed and we will see where we arrive. But on behalf of Latvia, I would like to say that we really appreciate the fact that Frontex has valued highly our contribution and has actually foreseen that we would contribute even more troops to this famous number of 10,000. Yesterday, we discussed this issue in our European Affairs Committee and decided that the contribution will definitely be there and the numbers will remain to be discussed. So this is definitely one of the ways how we will be moving forward to strengthening the European Union, but not exclusively so, because migration global aspects will also be will have to be tackled, and specifically the additional aid to African development that was mentioned several times here. In this regard, we all have to take a responsibility to arrive at those solutions and not to focus only on one way how to either solve this problem or disregard it. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Weberen van Haga, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, in the Netherlands, we have also experienced a substantial influx of migrants over the past years. And even though this has not led to an extreme tension in our country, we can clearly feel the resistance increasing. There's a point where people stop agreeing to more migrants coming into their country and simply start worrying about their own lives. And that's why the Dutch government, in theory, is positive with regards to the investment in Frontex to be able to scale up to a workforce of 10,000 people. However, Mr. Bernd Koerner just said the more the better, and that is my first question. How did we actually arrive to the number of 10,000? Could it be more? Could it be less? The second issue is how could we accelerate the repatriation of migrants who have entered Europe but have not been allowed to stay? And how can we ensure that countries cooperate with the repatriation of their citizens who illegally wandered abroad? Securing our borders is one measure, but it should be accompanied by the guarantee that migrants who have no future in Europe will be sent back one way or the other. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much.
Castaldo is the next, please.
Thank you, dear speakers. Thank you for your very messages. Ladies and gentlemen, discussing migration, we often make the mistake of focusing just on the instruments without considering the political will and the vision that governs them. It is clear, in fact, that whatever instrument put in place to strengthen borders can only have limited effects. Metaphorically speaking, it's like trying to stop a tsunami with paper barriers. The migratory crisis is only at its beginning, and the situation will get even worse. It's a structural one. Look at the trend of growth of African population 2050, plus 1 billion persons. We need to go beyond the management of the emergency. We need structural changes. We need a whole new model of migration management, both internal and external, and a new cooperation with Africa, focused on a strong dialogue and real projects with local communities on the ground. About tools, the proposal to deploy 10,000 European border guards as a solution to the tragic migration crisis, without first rethinking and revising the current Dublin regulation, without a compulsory, preventive and permanent redistribution of asylum seekers, without a shared way and responsibility to manage economic migrants, is tantamount to closing our eyes and hoping that the profound problems that are the root of the phenomenon magically disappear. On the internal aspect, we must ensure that burdens and efforts are genuinely shared. Steps in the direction are the only one to return to the original spirit of the European project. Solidarity between partners in practice and not just in words. But externally, and upon all, let's stress in a very clear way that if we won't provide this new vision and adequate commitment in bilateral ties between the EU and the African Union, China will take definitely all the space. That means that instead of paying the consequence of our historical mistakes, we will pay also the cost of their new approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker is
Ladies and gentlemen, Montenegro, as a famous partner of European Union, undertook all necessary measures to tackle a wave of illegal migration. But we need close cooperation of all European countries to estimate the risks of migration. The government of Montenegro in 2015 adopted the plan of action on migration, which was in accordance with international standards. We took into account the location of all borders, human resources, housing, settlements, health and social care, human aid, transport and security issues. Montenegro, with all its neighbors, established joint joint patrols for crossing border control. We have excellent cooperation with Frontex and implement the agreement on readmission. Montenegro is ready to undertake all the measures to establish good cooperation with its neighbors with the goal to face the problem of massive immigration. This issue, Montenegro tackled this issue on the principles of humanity, solidarity, expressed the wish to accept the migrants from African countries in accordance with its possibilities. It is a continued commitment to human goals established during the hard, difficult times when he had war at the territory of ex-Yugoslavia, when the refugees of all religion represented more than 1/4 of our population. Ladies and gentlemen, even the Today conference proves that West Balkan is, when it comes to the territory, an integral part of European Union. So I believe that the countries of West Balkan will become EU membership very soon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to come back to the question that Madam Mogherini brought up in her last reply in regards to Libya. We all know that Libya is still serving as a main hub for human trafficking and smuggling, as well in regards to the terrorism as well. My question would be based on the aspects what Madam Mogherini mentioned, that intensive discussions at the UN on different formats, and in regards to Libya's outreach to UN of possible peacekeepers mission into Libya. I would ask the question in regards to the tool instrument that we, European Union, have, and under the CSDP we set up more than 10 years ago. I'm talking about the EU battle groups that have never been used since their creation back in 2007. And their main task is actually external missions, peacekeeping missions. And I'm just questioning why we have never put this on the table of discussion on assistance to Libya through the African Union framework as well, cooperation. It also comes into question in regards to the PESCO and defense fund as well. Do we still keep our battle groups? There are 18 of them in European Union, each of them consisting of the size of 1 battalion. Should we actually, it's time to put them on the test. Do they work? Are they effective? Or we actually need to get rid of them? Because we know the PESCO agreement as well is not to overlap NATO responsibilities and activities in Europe with the European Union responsibilities. So I would just ask the question, what is the future for the EU battle groups? And should they be used at this current situation in stabilizing the situation in areas that are affected by the conflict and unstable situations? Thank you.
Thank you. Ana Gomez is the next speaker, please.
Thank you. I just would like to thank Ms. Sunjic for a very bold statement to us. And I could only second what Piero Fassino has said about the way we need indeed to manage migration, and that it is totally an illusion to think that we can have borders around us that will protect us. That's ridiculous. That is not going to happen. That's never going to prevent people in dire need to come. Indeed, we need to disarticulate that human traffickers who have the business because we give them the business, because we haven't created safe and legal ways, controlled ways, to indeed not put migrants or refugees in the need to put their lives in the hands of the human traffickers. We are the ones feeding the human traffickers. Stop that. Absolutely. And, of course, regarding Libya, sorry, Libya has always been a country of transition of migrants, and we are very much responsible for the mess in Libya because we did not work as Europeans after the fall of Gaddafi. We actually have been, since then, in rivalry. And in this way, we have enabled not just the other proxy wars going on in Libya, but indeed Daesh and Al-Qaeda to regroup and to find sanctuary in Libya. And they will come to want us. And until we find a solution for that, which of course has to be articulated with the African Union, but it first requires European sensible action and not the pretense that there is a Libyan Coast Guard. There is not such thing. What there are militia torturing, detaining migrants. That's what there is in Libya. And I know because I've been there. And I would just like to end by saying, yes, we need to address the overall question of, indeed, the SDGs. Development, genuine development, not the kind of development which has been the development that we have been fostering, which is actually enabling and reinforcing kleptocracies. That's one of the reasons why people leave their countries, because of misery, because of kleptocracies that we lead. I'm sorry to say, it's to me quite ridiculous to hear someone from the Ministry of Defense from Austria, the Secretary General, speak about the migration threat. And at the same time, I mean, this is a country, one of the European countries like mine, that provides fast track to reach wealthy migrants with minimal anti-money laundering and scrutiny, and indeed fast track to reach migrants while we let the poor migrants sink in the Mediterranean. This is outrageous. And why do we not, indeed, through our own fighting against tax havens and money launderings and the illicit flows of capitals, namely from Africa, do not indeed work for sustainable development, strengthening civil societies, demanding accountability for governance? That's the only way, indeed, we are going to prevent the flow of migrants to continue.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ilya Dan Barna, please.
Hello here. The migration is an obvious reality. It's just the changing. In this moment, we are just changing the knocking door. It started in Middle East. Now it's coming from North Africa and Saharan zone, and Black Sea route. It's also an existing risk. What I want to say is that any system which does not take care and consider the basis of human nature is going to fail, including our try to stop the smuggling industry. It's a matter of request and market law, request and service provided. So as long as European Union is not assumed to be a significant part for the efforts of peace in Africa and development in Africa, will be just again and again a discussion about how can you enforce the doors. Because closing the borders, you just mentioned, is not a solution. Securing the border might be a part of the solution, but the solution is to be active players in solving the Africa problems. Otherwise, we are just discussing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jaroslav Pshoch. Please take the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear guests, colleagues. First of all, I would like to say that I think that strengthening up the Frontex, it's a good idea, and it could help with migration. Second of all, I'm not a fan of building fences or wall at all. But we as a European Union, we can't heal all the problems the world has. We can't take everyone who wants to come to Europe. That's obvious. We should help the people who need asylum from Syria, for example. But the problem what we are facing now is that lots of people coming to Europe without any documents, saying that they are from Syria, and we don't have any system yet on the place how to recognize it. It's been almost 1 year. I've been in Brussels on Libe, talking about migration compact on migrants and refugees. And we still, after 1 year, we still have same discussion here in Vienna. Nothing changed. We are still hearing lots of things about legal ways, and that it's our fault because we don't have those legal ways. Okay, every member state could come up with says their plan for legal ways. I never heard about that in 1 year. The other issue, what I see, is that during the last year, we have heard lots of things about that European funds and getting money from the European funds could be also based on the solidarity. But solidarity means just about relocation to people. And this discussion strengthening up those populist parties that we are having in around Europe right now, those nationalist parties. And this is a big threat for us and for democracy in the European Union, so we should focus on that too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker, Celjana Zovko, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And also, I will continue on the same line as my colleague who mentioned that this is as well foreign affairs issue, not only a security issue. And I must remind you that 27 years ago we had a big influx of refugees with the fall of former Yugoslavia. So we had millions of refugees who came to Germany, and it was the similar situation to the one of 2015. No one is paying attention to what is really going on the borders of European Union at the moment. Croatia has the biggest border with Western Balkan, especially with Bosnia and Herzegovina, where we have a ticking bomb. We have an unresolved issue. We have also unresolved issues still with Kosovo. We have problems in Macedonia, and we are not able to solve the issues that are lying in front of us. How are we going to deal with Africa? I mean, I was in Africa, I was in Niger, in Abidjan, and in Zimbabwe recently. That's a big thing to resolve. We are not able to deal with the issues that are being unresolved for 27 years. We have a silent migration of the people leaving these areas and going. We have big powers just in front of us, Russia who is coming, Turkey on the border, Gulf countries on the borders. I think this is that holistic approach that you should take into consideration. I mean, European Parliament has adopted this strategy, I mean, global compact, and we have in UN agreement on the compact for migration that it will be a big discussion in Marrakesh on this approach that we are hearing here as well. But I think that we should deal first with our own issues that are lying in front of us and that are maybe menacing in the future months to come. Thank you.
Thank you. The last speaker, Miro Kovac, please.
Thank you so much. I'll try to be very nice to our host, so I'm going to speak in German.
100% border controls are not possible. We can never control migration 100%, but we have to be honest to ourselves. The countries that were so open towards migration have changed their politics and policies, and they have come closer to the countries that called for border controls 3 years ago. So, in questions and issues of migration, we need a consensus in Europe. We cannot simply decide in one country to do the one thing, and then all others have to follow that strategy. It means that we all have to engage in national politics. We have our citizens, we have our voters, but we have to think in terms of Europe as a whole, and we have to act accordingly, and especially in these issues as migration. We have seen in Germany what has happened, how the political scene has changed in the past 3 years. Just look at all the polls and the results in the west and the east of Germany. So we must use this migration policy in order to develop a common policy. And to our friends in Poland, the Czech Republic, in Slovakia and Hungary, we cannot simply force them to follow our politics. If they want to participate in it differently, then we have to find mechanism, as Jean-Paul Juncker said. We have to offer them these other mechanisms so that they can share in that if they do not want to take in migrants in the numbers that have been calculated, especially in the western part of the European Union. And finally, we need some kind of a positive Monroe Doctrine in the regions which are of strategic importance for us. In the regions where there are crises, there the European Union must be represented in a privileged form because migrants from those countries, in particular, where there is a crisis, want to come to us, to Germany, to Austria. And concerning Bosnia-Herzegovina and Eastern Europe, unless we are in a position to really be the strongest power, so to say, in our backyard, then certainly we cannot manage and will not manage to become a global actor. Thank you very much.
Of the speakers list, and now I would like to ask Mrs. Sunjic, Mr. Körner, Mr. Baumann to reply, but the maximum of 3 minutes, please. Mrs. Sunjic, please.
A lot has been said, and there's much to be replied to. Let me be brief. Oder ich habe Deutsch gesprochen. Egal.
Well, I spoke German before. It's a very complex issue, and it requires many different solutions. I did not say, replying to the gentleman whose name I did not put down from Italy, who spoke first, nobody says that everybody should come. That's ridiculous. We don't ask for that. But this either-or discussion is what I would like to get rid of. It's becoming so frequent in Europe and certainly doesn't lead to solutions. I'd like to say, stop it. Let's break it down into smaller subjects: crisis management, crisis prevention. What is Europe doing for crisis prevention where there are trouble spots? What do you do in the transit countries? What do you do in the first asylum countries? And one of the measures within this large complex of measures is, of course, border controls. Nobody denies that, but it can only be one of many measures from the country of origin to integration. That's the course. And perhaps a little story. I love the Roman Empire. I take a great interest in that in contrast to all of my fellow colleagues in school. I loved Latin, so I've been reading a lot. In the first century before Christ, there was a big discussion that Rome is losing its identity because the Goths and from the British Isles and from Carthago and from the Middle East, so many people were coming to the then center of the world, and for 2,000 years they had succeeded in keeping their identity, and they will most likely keep it now as well. And externalization, I didn't say anything on that because it's a fantasy. There is no country externally to send up a refugee center where you would make the asylum and conduct the asylum proceedings, and it would be counterproductive in a way. All these individual and isolated measures that are not part of an overall strategy may be counterproductive. Once again, I would like to underline, I'm speaking here not on behalf of the United Nations, and I do not speak on behalf of UNHCR. I'm no longer with UNHCR, but I have my own research and communication agency, so I do not represent the views of the United Nations. Perhaps very briefly concerning the demographic development in Africa. Well, not all Africans want to come to Europe. I speak with these people, and we had a big discussion in Somalia where parents are telling their children, stay here, build up your future here. And some people are ridiculously making fun about that. So parents will buy taxis for their sons because they will need some money for their bride. So we will buy them a taxi so that you can make money here so that you will not run away. Now, these are discussions that are taking place there as well. And the most important thing is that if young people have the impression that there is no future for me here, then they will leave the country. And returns. And with the cooperation of the German government and also the Ministry of Defense here in Austria, I'm conducting a small research project where we ask the people coming from West Africa what could be a reasonable return policy so that it's not a revolving door, people coming back then again after having been returned. And they're all saying, please, do not give us money. One actually said, if you give us 5,000 euros, then we have to pay 2,000 euros at the incoming airport to leave the airport, and the rest will be eaten up by the family. So what they are saying, give us some training, some occupational training, and then help us with our business, help us with some fiscal security, give us some perspective when we come back and want to and can build up a small family undertaking. Then we will be able to employ also other members of the family. We will create income, and we will prevent my smaller brother from also coming here. So you have to be reasonable, and you have to take a differentiated approach. So this is not an either-or situation, and there isn't only just one solution, but you have to turn many screws because it's a complex issue, and you need replies of the same complexity. Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Kerner.
Thank you very much for this very, very interesting and very lively discussion. Allow me to respond, starting with the last contribution. It was said 100% border control is not possible. I couldn't agree more with you. 100% control at the borderline is definitely not possible, but we are talking about an integrated way of performing border control. We have to have risk-based, we have to have targeted controls, we have to have an overview on what is coming and what should be coming and what should not be coming and what we have to look at. Unresolved border issues and the whole complex of Western Balkan, allow me to shift this to the end. Legislation. Please, if we have to perform a certain level of border control, and I'm now talking also on behalf of the member states, it's based on legislation. If we have to obey or if we have to accept the regulation 656 on the implementation of sea border surveillance, then it's based on legislation. If there is something to be further developed as regards to legislation, then we need to do some reforms, some amendments on the legislation before we then start to encounter new endeavors. As regards the more, the better. Practically speaking, in our files we have 10,000 names. But once again, I do not want to focus on do we have 10,000 names or not, and how did the number of 10,000 come up. We need to have a serious increase in the available human resources in order to be able and more capable to respond to challenges and also to release the member states from constantly being asked to deploy at the external border where they are already by themselves short of staff. So please, let's not focus on 10,000 or 9,000 or 11,000 or how many thousand. We need more staff. The more we can get, the better it would be. Of course, we would use it efficiently, effectively, and not waste staff anywhere where it should go. Coming back once again to legislation. Ladies and gentlemen, this goes a little bit also to the overall situation and whether it's only border control based. I would like to talk bilaterally also afterwards with colleagues from Greece. A huge part of the migration problem we have currently is based on the fact that we still do not have a functioning common European asylum system. We come in before people ask for asylum, and we come in after people have completed their asylum procedures in case of negative decisions to return. But if we look at the Greek system and the Greek situation on the 5 hotspot islands, it is a little bit similar to what the colleagues from Montenegro have mentioned. This is a very delicate and a very sensitive mixture where we have to devote a great deal of attention to. Altogether, and this is my closing already on the general part, we have every week, as I said, between 1,200 and 1,400 people, devoted people, to execute the tasks. We have mechanisms in place that in case of any infringement of international law or humanitarian law, we can start the complaint mechanism, we can start the investigations from ourselves, and this can go to the suspension and disciplinary measures on our side up to release from office. If it is our staff, the rest is national competence. Whatever is reported to us is followed up. That there might be problems, I do not even deny, but we are working on them. As regards the Western Balkans, at the beginning of my intervention, I tried to figure out, should I include it, then I'm even more over time, or should I leave it out? Ladies and gentlemen, the Western Balkans will be the next challenge. I have last week been at the signature process of the status agreement. The next status agreement with former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia is about to come, and yesterday a delegation came home with good negotiating results from Bosnia. We need to operationally reorganize our whole approach to the Western Balkans, because otherwise other people will do that for us, and then the problems will not decrease but increase. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank, Herr Baumann, bitte.
Thank you, Mr. Baumann, please.
Ja, ich möchte.
Yes, I would like to agree with the words spoken by the previous speaker. I think 99% we agree with each other. Perhaps we have a slightly different view on it because we come from different starting points. So with regard to your questions, I would like to begin. Well, I have to agree that you're right, that from 2008, it was clear that migration would come. There would be migratory flows to the EU. After the Arab Spring, at the very latest, it was clear for everybody. For everybody, it was clear. It could be deducted. And when the refugee camps in the Lebanon and in Jordan, well, they were really, it was clear that they had really performed in a superhuman way over the last years. In the last decades, in fact, if you calculate all of the time together, you think about the Palestinian crisis as well, with regarding to the stress and the burden for these countries. And in 2015, for myself as an ordinary citizen, it was impossible for me to understand why it was at this point in 2015 when we started reducing the funds that were available to the refugee camps. From the point of view of Austria, the Balkan was very close by, and as a small country, well, we might not be able to have much to say always everywhere on the global stage, but as the speaker before me has also said, the EU and Austria is going to try to do a great deal to make that happen because it's so important, because it's so close to us. Here the EU has to be active, and we look back at the situation with refugees in Lebanon or in Jordan, and then we see that there, in those camps, they have you have a situation where there are very financially strong countries in the area, but they're not involved. They don't contribute, let's say. And at the same time, we from the West, or from Western Europe, we are losing more and more influence in those areas as the EU. Then we're certainly doing something wrong here together. So 5 or 6 years ago in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Tunisia, for example, we have let them to their own devices, I think. And I say we, and the reason why I say we, that it's our fault. You've got to be very careful with I. You should always say who is responsible. I myself, as an individual, am not at fault here, and I don't think Austrian was wrong, is at fault necessarily. It's a very small country. But in the EU, there's the larger countries. So you have to. We always contribute to the EU, and we have showed a great deal of humanitarian effort. So if you look at the First World War, the Second World War, 56, 68 in the Czech Republic, in the 80s and the 90s, Poland, Yugoslavia, Austria was always a country that stepped up to the plate first and took refugees and integrated refugees. So there's lots of Austrians who speak German, but they have a lot in common with their neighbors in Italy and Poland, in Switzerland, in the southeast of Europe. We always have a very clear cultural understanding with those other countries. We have a shared history, as younger generations need to keep an eye on that history and to learn that history. But I think we have to protect borders. That is a task of the government and a contribution of the state defense. So I think at home, just as you lock your door and you make sure that nobody can climb in through the window in the night, I think we have to have a controlled situation at the borders. And I think here that our own population have to be able to see that things are not just running in an uncontrolled fashion. And I think it can't be in our common interest to let that happen. I am very positive, really very positive, positively surprised that, or proud even, that in here we can be discussing quite controversial things, perhaps, but all of us, we represent a shared and common opinion within the European Union, which is very big. I mean, we're talking about 500 million population in the EU. And I think we should find common objectives which allow us to protect our citizens, but also give some kind of security to our neighbors outside of the EU, that we can support them. Because here, if we talk, so if there are 15, 16 soldiers we're talking about for 500, a community of 500 million, well, that's nothing, really. It's not very many. We're talking about 10,000 Frontex personnel. So for the 5 million kilometers of our borders, that's not a great deal. So together, for the sake of our children, for our grandchildren, we have to really set goals which will protect this community. And the discussion that we've had today, and EU with the presidency in 2018, well, I think we should be motivated, even more motivated and even more confident about searching for the solutions to the challenges that we're faced with. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Baumann.
We have now reached the end of session 1. Thank you very much to our keynote speakers for the interesting arguments in very, very important issues to the European Union. And thank you to you all who take part on the discussion.